Too much. Yeah. Okay. Now let's see. Actually, we might not even need these microphones, huh?
Oh, we do.
We do.
We do. Also,
Okay.
also for the video.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Einen schönen guten Abend, herzlich willkommen, schön, dass Sie da sind. Es ist ein weiterer Abend in Ilija Trojanows Autorenprojekt Trojanow trifft. Er hat heute William Vollmann eingeladen, den ich sehr herzlich begrüße. It's very lovely to have you here. Thank you very much for coming.
Oh. Dankeschön und guten Abend und es tut mir leid, dass ich nicht Deutsch besser kann, aber das ist Leben. Ne? Like a little baby, his first steps.
William Vollmann wird sich heute mit Arme, Leute, sein letztes Buch, hier befassen. Arme, Leute ist ein groß angelegter Essay auf Englisch, erschienen unter dem Titel Poor People, ein Essay, in dem er mit Poor People ins Gespräch kommt. Er hat sie in den unterschiedlichsten Ländern getroffen, von Thailand, Russland, Kasachstan, über den Kongo, Kolumbien und auch in den USA direkt vor seinem Haus. Also es sind ganz unterschiedliche Gesellschaften auch, in denen die Gespräche, die er geführt hat, stattgefunden haben. Aus der theoretischen Befassung mit Armut ist sehr viel bekannt, dass sie Unsichtbarkeit bedeutet, dass sie Entfremdung bedeutet, dass sie Abhängigkeit, ausgesetzt sein bedeutet. All diese Dinge weiß William Vollmann in der Theorie. Er schafft es allerdings auch in sehr theoriekundiger Weise trotzdem die Menschen in den Blick zu nehmen. Er schafft es, den Menschen in den Fokus zu setzen, dem er gegenüber sitzt und diese Balance sozusagen zu finden. Es ist ein menschenzentriertes Schreiben, würde ich es nennen, das essayistisch ist, sich zwischen Reportage, Literatur, Ethik, Anthropologie bewegt, und ich glaube, es ist tatsächlich auch diese spezifische Form dieses Schreibens, diese Essays, die auch verhindert, dass sie voyeuristisch werden, also dass es keine Voyeurismus, keine Ausstellung dessen ist, womit sie sich befassen. In den USA erschien das Buch bereits 2007, es wurde mit einiger zeitlicher Verspätung übersetzt sozusagen. Fragen, die er seinen Gesprächspartnern und Gesprächspartnerinnen gestellt hat, ist zum Beispiel, wer ist arm, wer ist reich, wie arm ist eigentlich arm, und das ist wahrscheinlich auch für die Frage der Gesellschaftskritik und der Machtkritik eine der wichtigsten Fragen, warum sind die Armen arm? Es ist also immer ein Gespräch mit den Menschen und nicht nur ein Gespräch über die Menschen. Ich erwähne vielleicht noch zwei andere Publikationen. Der Roman Europe Central ist auch auf Deutsch erschienen, ein Opus Magnum in der Übersetzung, vor 2013 erschienen. In der Rezeption wurde das Buch auch als Krieg und Frieden des 21. Jahrhunderts bezeichnet, und ich würde gern noch erwähnen, 2004 erschienen Rising Up and Rising Down. Das ist ein über 3000 Seiten umfassendes Werk, in dem sich William Vollmann auch mit den Wurzeln, mit den Folgen und mit der Gegenwärtigkeit von Gewalt in den unterschiedlichsten Gesellschaften befasst. Ein großer Teil davon sind Reportagen aus Kambodscha, Somalia und dem Irak. Ilija Trojanow muss ich Ihnen hier im Haus ja nicht vorstellen, aber ich möchte trotzdem gern auf eines noch hinweisen. Es wird nämlich im Frühjahr ein neues Buch von Ilija Trojanow erscheinen, das ich deswegen auch erwähne, weil es einerseits mit seinem Romanwerk mit Macht und Widerstand von 2017, glaube ich, assoziativ zusammenhängt, weil es sich mit Macht befasst. Das Buch der Macht, wie man sie erringt und, Klammer auf, nie, Klammer zu, wieder loslässt. Das erwähne ich auch, weil natürlich, glaube ich, der Kontext, in dem wir uns gesprächlich bewegen, Ökonomie, die Auswirkungen auf das Individuum, immer auch natürlich mit Macht zusammenhängen. Vielen herzlichen Dank, Ilija Trojanow, dass du auch heute hier bist. Ich darf dich auch herzlich begrüßen und damit auch an dich übergeben.
Danke, Ilija, danke.
Ja, schönen guten Abend. Schön, dass Sie da sind. Ich hoffe, Sie haben mitbekommen, dass wir uns auf Englisch unterhalten werden, weil das klang zwar sehr gut, was William Vollmann auf Deutsch gesagt hat, aber it's not feasible to talk in German, is it?
No, I'm pretty pathetic in my German after all these years, yeah. I used to speak it a little bit better, maybe a lot better, but that was half a century ago, maybe.
In the good old days.
In the good old days, yeah. The days that never happened, yeah.
Deswegen willkommen und jetzt ins Englische. So first of all, welcome, Bill. Welcome to Vienna. Welcome to the Alte Schmiede.
Thanks for your kindness.
It's a real honor for me to be able to have this public conversation with you. Thanks.
Well, I feel the same way about you, and I really enjoyed meeting you. I hope we can go to Bulgaria together sometime. I'd really like that.
Yeah, or maybe Sacramento.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just as good.
Probably just as bad, yeah. So, I was wondering how to describe one of my favorite colleagues, and the only thing I could come up with is that William Vollmann does not write books, he writes libraries. So to give you an example, one project we're going to talk about tonight is called Carbon Ideologies. This is the paperback version, and it's one of your shorter projects. It's, I think, about 1,200 pages long.
Yeah.
More or less.
I should have made it a little longer, but I forgot.
Yeah, you were too concise.
Yeah, I was that time. Yeah.
He's finished a novel that hopefully will be published in English next year that is more than 4,000 pages long.
Yeah, roughly. Yeah. That's in manuscript.
It's difficult to count once you've passed 3,000 pages.
Yeah. Every time I cut it, it seemed to get longer. And
yeah. There's a kind of vagueness in quantity.
Yeah, it's for the best.
So, my very, very, very first question is, you've basically invented your own genre, which I think is expansive. The way you look at the world and the way you write is expansive. So you're kind of embracing multitudes and bringing in so many different perspectives, starting, and this is a very good example, Carbon Ideologies, starting with facts, data, then moving through human experience, and then reaching out into the larger contextual kind of interactions and philosophical reflections. And I think the first very large project you did of this kind was Rising Up, Rising Down.
Yes.
7 volumes trying to, in a way, describe and analyze how violence comes about, how it affects people, how it affects society. So what was your motivation, or were you not happy with the existing genres? Did you have a sense that you have to kind of break out from certain limitations that you encountered in existing genres for you to kind of have this expansive approach?
Well, I knew that I didn't understand how bad global warming is, and I hoped and expected that that much of the discussion of it was alarmist. Paul Ehrlich, wrote a book called Famine 1975. The Earth was going to crash by then, and it didn't. And you get a little cynical. It's like when you're told, oh, marijuana's the path to hard drugs. You're going to die if you take a marijuana cigarette. So I thought, wouldn't it be great if climate change was like that? And unfortunately, the more I looked into it, the more horrified I got. And for a while, I was in, one of those stages of accepting death that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talks about. Oh, first we deny, and then maybe we bargain, and we get mad, and this. So those of my neighbors in the States who actually believe in climate change, and there are not many of them, they're still in the bargaining stage. What if we drove a little bit less, we turned up the air conditioner, we turned down the heater, and that could make a real difference. And it makes essentially no difference. And I would say that we're captive perpetrators. In California, 15% of all residential power consumption goes to power the standby mode, the ready lights on devices. Ice makers. People don't think about those. Refrigerators come with those. It's a huge waste. My Japanese friends love their rice. When they flood the rice fields, the anaerobic bacteria give off vast quantities of methane. Methane is more than 80 times worse than carbon dioxide. I like to eat cauliflower. Cauliflower takes a lot of nitrogen fertilizer. That gives off nitrous oxide. That's another of these three most dangerous gases. What can we do about that? Every time we use paper, cement, steel, aluminum, plastic, we are participating in more than half of all industrial emissions from those so-called big five materials alone. A homeless person in the States, someone at the absolute bottom of the ladder, uses more energy than the global average because of all the plastic, all the, the yucky recycled and unrecycled stuff he buys and throws in the garbage. So it's really, really discouraging. There's no way to micro-regulate ourselves out of it.
So basically what you're saying is that you're educating the audience because you had to educate yourself?
Yeah, I really didn't know how bad it was. And the only way I can ever decide something is to go in and see for myself. If I really wanted to get to the bottom of what's going on in Gaza, I would have to go there. When I heard about the nuclear accident at Fukushima, I went there and I couldn't believe how bad that was. Everyone said, Bill, we need nuclear energy to stop climate change. Nuclear energy is horrendous in its own way.
Yeah, just to explain that, it's in the first volume, it's actually nearly about half of the book. A very, very long reportage of you going there. And there are two things that strike me when reading your books. One is that you seem to, well, the first book is called No Immediate Danger, but you seem to, well, how do I put it cautiously? You seem to be drawn to danger, or at least you seem to have a certain affinity when you're researching to danger.
Well, you're a pretty adventurous guy yourself, I would say.
Yeah, but not. I thought so, but then I met you. And the other thing is, you seem to be obsessive in your research. And how does that work? Can you describe it? Is it like there's always another horizon of knowledge that needs to be included, and then it's a kind of ongoing process of assembling impressions and information?
Well, I'm a good German boy, so I try to be diligent. And I feel that in an important topic, no amount of work is enough. It took me a long time to start understanding how to measure radiation, and there was so much more that I would have liked to do if I had had more money. For instance, I would have liked to have a forward-looking infrared camera to photograph carbon emissions, methane emissions, so people could really see them. But all I can do is my best.
And because in the introduction you mentioned poor people, so there's this big project dealing with poverty, there's an even bigger project dealing with violence, and now there's this huge project that basically describes the foundations of our economy and civilization. So you are addressing the book to someone who is living in the future, and you are sometimes directly talking to this person. It's unclear whether this future is going to be utopian or dystopian.
It's pretty clear.
Well, no. Well, I thought in the beginning it's clear, but then there are a few slips where you actually ask this person, well, you might have figured this out, or you might have other ways of dealing with this. So I thought there's a little bit of hope there. Maybe after some kind of catastrophe, there has been kind of a reawakening.
Well, it's certainly possible that that technology, for once, could help us. I mean, the basic problem is we need to reduce demand for everything, demand for anything that involves energy. And so we could do that through a massive population reduction or through better forms of energy, but just reducing emissions right now or even stopping emissions isn't necessarily enough. The carbon dioxide that we have released into the atmosphere will gradually decay, but it will continue to warm the planet for up to 11,000 years. It's really, really bad. So maybe if we can figure out some way to sequester the carbon, maybe some plant-based thing that we can't imagine, then somehow we could turn it around. But you know, recently I was trying to decide who to vote for in the American presidential election. And of course, I despise Donald Trump. And I was going to vote for Kamala Harris, and then in the debate, climate change came up. So Trump said nothing about it. And Kamala said, well, I used to be against fracking, but now I'm in the great state of Pennsylvania. Yeah, we have to frack. And it was just what Hillary Clinton was saying, you know. And so I'm lucky living in California where my vote doesn't really count, you know, because the electoral votes are going to go to Kamala. I decided to vote for the Green Party, even though I know very little about their foreign policy. I thought that's all I can do to vote my conscience.
But I had a different reaction to. I mean, you have so much data, you have so many arguments that the more I read, the more I thought this can only, there's only one saving grace, there's only one hope, and that's overcoming capitalism. Right. That was my take. Would you understand that kind of reaction of a reader?
Yes, yeah. So often, you know, my friends in business say, no, Bill, yeah, I realize my new business is very, very small, but all I need to do is create a demand. And that's the problem. We can't create any more demand for energy. And maybe there's a way to do it. I was quite pleased to find out that with solar energy, it's theoretically possible to have more than 100% efficiency. It seems impossible, but if you can make one photon split into two photons, it's possible. So what if we could do that? What if we had some huge satellite that was capturing solar energy and beaming it down, and all these things could make a difference. So
yeah, but then at the same time you become pessimistic because it's not only how we get energy, it's also the manufacturing. So in a system of eternal growth, manufacturing will grow, correct?
Right.
So that's only going to be a part-time solution.
For sure. You know, part of the book is set in the coal country of West Virginia. The people there love their coal. They believe that it was created by God for them to use. It wasn't? Well, I haven't asked him, but it's possible, yeah.
No, but why else would you put it in the earth?
That's right. Well, you know, we have to worship God or Mammon or whatever in our own way. As these coal companies have become more mechanized, they need fewer and fewer people to ruin a mountain or whatever. So they lay people off, and then they blame it, you know, on the socialists who won't let coal be developed. The fact is, we're more productive in our manufacturing and all kinds of stuff. So theoretically, you're right. If we could take this productive surplus and use it for people, if we could have robots doing more of the work and spread out the results to everybody, then we could reduce some sort of demand. I agree. of course, the big companies are going to fight it tooth and nail. All my friends say, Bill, you just don't understand. That's just not how it works. And we have to have a lot more babies because our population is aging and we need the young people to support the old people. We don't. The robots could do it.
Yeah, your friends pop up in your books, and they always contradict whatever you. So you seem to be kind of surrounded by friends who don't share your opinions or your insights.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Most of the people tell me, you know, Bill, you're so negative. All you do, you just complain. Why don't you just get with the program and live with the rest of us? And I keep thinking, well, I'm trying to make a difference. No, you're not, Bill. You're depressing me. You're asking for the impossible. And all I can do is say, well, sorry. What would you do to try to decarbonize the economy?
Now, I myself couldn't do anything because that would be dictatorship. But if you're asking about my global solution,
yeah, and say you're a benevolent dictator. Why not? Yeah.
No, I'm not particularly fond of benevolent dictatorship. No, I think we would have to start with a post-growth economy, or degrowth, as they call it now.
Right.
Degrowth, and some form of climate justice or climate equality, some kind of transferring wealth into the poor people globally, and some form of delinking production, manufacturing from carbon and greenhouse gases. So that would have to be the first step. Now, that seems to me impossible within the capitalist system. So to me, it's very evident that there has to be some kind of post-capitalistic structure of production and a new kind of democracy. But would that be something that is even, would your friends say that's even more crazy than you are?
Oh, they think it was ridiculous. And they get really cross when I propose some kind of a very practical short-term solution, which would be that the EU should consider boycotting the US if Trump, for instance, comes to power and pulls out of the Accords, or if Kamala keeps racking up emissions, because you know, people do listen when their financial interests are affected. And I was really stunned to find out that there are many, many more efficient ways, for instance, to produce coal, to produce the nitric acid that's a big ingredient of so many things, including nylon, and that companies will dig in their heels because they don't want to be regulated. So in Japan, they can produce coke, which is sort of burned concentrated coal that they put in furnaces to make steel, for using about half as much energy input as they do in the States. It seems like a no-brainer, you know, to upgrade and do that, but the companies won't do it. So maybe there's some way to make them do it.
Yeah, I mean, throughout the book, there are many, many examples of what might be possible in terms of more efficient ways. But time and again, you point out that this is not being done because it's not profitable, or there's no kind of need to do it, and there's no pressure to do it. Which basically means that at the end, I thought to myself, this is also a deconstruction of the illusion of green capitalism. And at the same time, most of our politicians claim that all we need is better technology. And you make the point, time and again, that better technology already exists in many of these areas. So it's just a question of implementation. But since it's not being done, I think this is an absolutely shattering blow to this concept of, you know, we just need to improve technology a little bit, we need to become greener, and then everything will be okay.
Well, I wonder, for instance, about the clothes that I wear, or the eyeglasses that I use. Every time I need new eyeglasses, the styles of the frames have changed. And no, Bill, you don't understand. You have to buy new frames. Why? What if I could have a nice metal pair of frames, I don't care how they look, that would last me all my life, and someone else could use them? Why is it that I have to keep replacing my clothes? They could have much more durable clothes. Well, if I didn't buy as many pairs of underwear, someone wouldn't make as much money. That's the problem. What if I could have 3 or 4 pairs of underwear for the rest of my life? You know, everyone thinks that's a disgusting idea. I guess I would have to keep them clean. Yeah.
Well, it just depends how often you wash them. Huh?
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, there's this character, do you know the crime novels by Lee Child?
No.
So there's this character, Jack Reacher,
Okay.
who he walks around the US and basically all he owns is what he's wearing.
Good for him.
So every evening he washes his underwear and then puts it underneath the mattress, because apparently that's the best way. I hope the author has researched this. But apparently this is the best way to dry it during the night. Next morning he puts it on and then continues his journey.
Yeah, that's reasonable. When I was in the Congo, I just had 1 pair of clothes, because as soon as I would start walking around, I would be drenched with sweat anyway. So every night I'd just shower in my clothes and hang my clothes, and they would be, you know, relatively clean and rather damp. And I'd put them on, and then they'd be a little more damp, and what was the big deal?
Yeah, I mean, in Congo you're always damp, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I had a similar experience walking through Tanzania from Bagamoyo to Ujiji, that I started my journey with a rucksack which weighed 30 kilograms.
Oh, wow.
And then I realized that this is not sustainable.
What was in your rucksack?
Well, too many clothes, for example, to start off.
Right, yeah.
Second pair of shoes, you know, and a bottle of whiskey, of course.
Well, that's the important thing.
Actually, it was Lagavulin. Now, the whiskey was not a problem because I drank it.
Yeah, and whiskey doesn't weigh anything anyway.
Yeah. That's an interesting theory. Let me no, but the really intriguing experience for me was that if you have to carry your own kind of surplus affluence, you just get rid of it.
Right.
So what happened is just the next village, I started, you know, do you want a T-shirt? Do you want a, you know, whatever? And then it was down to, I don't know, 16 or 18 kilograms, and then I was a happy camper.
Right.
So basically, if every one of us would have to wear whatever we own, that would be quite a good solution to the problem.
I think so. I have a lot of friends who are homeless. I live in basically the Skid Row area of alcoholics and transients and so on and so forth. And so these people cannot wash their clothes. So they get clothes fairly often donated by churches. They wear them, and then they just throw them out in the street. They are doing the worst of all. They only own what they can carry, so when they don't want to carry it anymore, they throw it away and contribute to waste. But yeah, if we could all just keep what we need. I mean, so much of what I have, I don't need. Or I think I might not need. You know, I'm going to Ukraine tomorrow, and I'm thinking, well, how many shirts do I need? What's going to happen? Can I lose it all? If I lose it, it's a waste. If I don't have enough, then I stink. You know, so what?
Yeah. Also, I'm sure they have T-shirts in Ukraine.
I'm sure they do, yeah.
So, speaking of the homeless, you know, was that one of the inspirations to write Poor People? Was it kind of really wanting to see them and understand them?
Yeah. The more I learn about them, the more I love them. And whenever I'm feeling sorry for myself, if I go across the street to the tent city and do something kind for one of them, that person is going to say, I love you, Bill, or, you know, give me whatever he has. Often that means handing me some crystal meth, you know, in front of a policeman. I say, oh, thank you, I already put it on my cereal today. But I really feel that, you know, if we're talking about the alienation of capitalism, all these things, such as the automobile, make it harder for us to see each other and talk to each other. A lot of the older hobos I know remember the times when they could ride the freight trains and knock on somebody's door and say, please, could I chop wood for you, or do some weeding in exchange for a meal? You know, now the gardener does the weeding, or you do it with your lawnmower, and someone comes and knocks on the door and you say, get away from me or I'm going to call the police. So it's more and more impossible to connect with people who deserve what I have, no more and no less than I deserve it.
You know, I was thinking of your book a few years back. I was doing some research in Guatemala, and one of the people I met said, you know, I only became poor once they started developing our region.
That sounds right.
And to me, it was first of all, it was a provocation, but then he explained it. He said, you know, before that, we had the rainforest, we had a little bit of land, you know, we would go out, we would find something to eat. We were not affluent, but we managed to survive in dignity.
Right.
But then they burnt down the rainforest. It's now a palm oil plantation, and the only chance you have, you lose your land, you lose your access to nature, and the only chance you have is to start working for the plantation, and you're given not enough money to survive. And then he said, suddenly, I realized what poverty is.
Right, and that actually illustrates two issues. One issue is, you might say, the enclosure of the commons. You take away people's ability to fish when you pollute the river and so on and so forth, and that makes them poor. And the other thing is what the Marxists call relative poverty. I interviewed some Russian beggars, and there was a nice old lady, Oksana, who said, you know, back in the day, in the 40s and 50s, we never thought of ourselves as poor. We all lived pretty much the same under socialism, and we had enough to eat, and it was all fine. And then all of these other people started to outstrip us, and we started feeling more poor and jealous and everything else. And it's totally natural to feel that way.
Yeah, you're confronted with other forms of affluence.
Right, and as society evolves around you, becomes more capitalized, if you like, then if you stay still, then you do find yourself more marginalized. You know, a few decades ago, I decided I didn't want a cell phone or instant communication, all that kind of stuff. And so there are more and more places I can't go. In the States, they say, oh, no, sir, no, we don't accept cash anymore, so I can't go there. If I want to get a new passport, I have to pay somebody to go online for me to apply for it. And so I become a little bit more marginalized, and I can see what it's like for people who were powerless to make that choice and became more marginalized than I. It's really, really sad and discouraging.
So from all the research you did, was there a sense that the emotional or psychological reality of poverty is as important as the material?
Yes, and I remember seeing some people in Cambodia who were quite happy. They didn't have very much compared to what I had, but yeah, they could still get stuff in the jungle, and the kids enjoyed playing with their dogs, and they were fairly free, maybe happier than some of the rich people I know. It is a sense of attitude. One of the first parts of Poor People is a study I made of some cleaning ladies in Thailand. And when I think back on it, I honestly don't know, how I feel about it. These ladies would tell me that they were poor because they'd been bad in a previous life. And so, a Marxist might say, well, that's false consciousness instilled by the ruling class so that they're not going to rise up and so forth. On the other hand, from their point of view, if they couldn't change the system, were they better off having some peace of mind by thinking that they deserved what in fact they don't deserve? I don't know the answer to that.
But to them, this thought or this belief was comforting?
Yes, it was comforting because, it was what would Dante call it? The contrapasso, the punishment that fits the crime. Whereas in Mexico, there's much more overt class hatred. And when I ask people there why they were poor, the most common answer I heard is because the rich have stolen from us. And on the one hand, you have to say, well, more power to them. Maybe they will have some sort of uprising and do better for themselves. On the other hand, it definitely increases their anger and their tension. It's not for me to say, what's best for them in that.
Yeah, but that is something that is, I think, very typical of your writing is you're not judgmental, not even towards yourself,
well, yeah.
to no one, not even to the author.
Yeah. It's hard for me to even know what's best for me, but usually if someone says this is what's best for you, then instantly I decide it isn't. I have a very low tolerance for authority, but that means then how can I say what's best for any other person? I can say that nobody deserves to be hungry, that nobody deserves to drown or burn to death because of climate change. But I would be a fool if I had all sorts of detailed solutions.
But that's interesting. Would you say that absolute conviction that cannot be rocked is a form of authority, or is the beginning of authority?
Let's see. Did you ever read this this really interesting trilogy by Manis Sperber, Like a Tear in the Ocean?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I love that book. And one of the things that he says is he was going on very much against the doctrinaire Stalinists and so forth. But he said, the instant that you're sure that you have the solution, that's when you start going off the rails and making mistakes. And it's sort of like what Thoreau always said, that you should never let your knowledge get in the way of what's far more valuable and important, which is your ignorance. Because as soon as you stop knowing that you're ignorant, you're going to make mistakes. And of course, that doesn't let you off the hook. You have to try to make some kind of improvement in your life and other people's lives, but you have to be prepared for the fact that that what might have been correct is now no longer correct based on changing conditions that you cannot understand.
So would you like to improve your German?
Yeah, I definitely would. I'm ashamed that I haven't.
So the title of the novel by Manis Sperber is Wie eine Träne im Ozean.
Oh, quite different, huh? Yeah.
No, it's like, it just sounds better in German, but otherwise it's...
Yeah, for sure. Is that book still widely read here?
Does anybody know what that's widely...
Oh,
yeah?
You have, yeah. Oh, is there? Yeah. I found it in the 80s, this Holmes and Meyer translation, and I've never met anybody in the States who's read it. And I don't know why. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's a modern classic, so
Yeah, he really is, yeah.
But just to go back to the poor people, one thing, when I was living in Bombay, there was a slum nearby, but nearly next door, and I used to go in there quite often, got to know a few people. One thing that struck me is that there was less pessimism than in our countries here. And the more I thought about it, the more it seemed that pessimism you have to be able to afford pessimism. It's a kind of a byproduct of luxury.
Right.
Did you have a similar kind of experience with all your research?
Well, oftentimes I'm most fearful if I think that I have something to lose. Solzhenitsyn says, and how can I ever know if this is true? He in the Gulag Archipelago and in the First Circle, that once people are actually in prison, they have a chance for some kind of spiritual development. And until then, they're going to be fearful and hypocritical and maybe cruel and do whatever they can not to end up in prison. On the other hand, do I want to be in prison? No. So I don't know what to say.
That's a question that has really fascinated me for a long time. I did a project where I interviewed for many years people who were in the Bulgarian Gulag. And all of them said, without exception, that they were only free in prison or in the Gulag. Because you have, number one, what you just said, you have nothing to lose. But the other thing is that you have an absolute power of honesty, because you're no longer in the business of making compromises. You're no longer in the business of fearing that you might say something that someone might report you, and all these kind of variations of dealing with insecurities. All of them are gone. Everything is very clear.
Right.
And there's absolutely nothing they can do to you because they've already done the worst to you. They've put you in the Gulag.
Right. The question I have is that because these were mostly political prisoners who were innocent and idealistic?
No, they're not innocent. They say... No, that's interesting you would use the word innocent, because I also used it.
Right.
And they got a little bit cross with me. And
really?
They said, we were not innocent. We were fighting against the system.
Okay.
So we were guilty of what we were accused. Yeah, we were guilty of trying to organize a revolution or whatever it might have been.
Yeah, fair enough. When I talk to people who are in American and Mexican prisons, it's a completely different thing. It's just a series of arbitrary horrors, and not just the way that the prisoners are treated by the guards and by the authorities. I have a friend who's a civil rights lawyer, and the stuff that he tells me is just awful. Some of these places, the guards will make the prisoners fight and bet on them, or they put them in these transport buses and leave the manacles on, so people can't go to the toilet and clean themselves for days, and they get neuropathy in their arms. But then the prisoners themselves seem to have very little solidarity, except within their cliques and gangs. And so, to me, that sounds like a far worse environment than being free, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, probably is. Probably the difference there is between the political and the criminal.
That's what I would think. Yeah. Have you read Shalamov's stories?
Of course.
Yeah, that's right. Well, when he talks about these Urkas, who were called the people's friends, and they were supposed to help out and liquidate the enemies of the people, they had a pretty good time. And Shalamov, reserves most of his hatred for these brutal criminals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Understandably so.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Just before I forget, Poor People has been translated into German. It's a Suhrkamp edition. I think there are a few copies available outside. This will be published in February in German. There is, I hope I understood this correctly, there's an edition now of photographs.
So I'm told. I haven't seen it
You haven't
yet,
seen
but
it? Okay, we believe in the existence of that particular edition.
yeah.
But then the whole thing will be published in February. It's already, one of the translators, Georg, is here. It's already been translated and it will be published. So if anyone's interested, otherwise also the English edition is available as a beautiful penguin. But now I mentioned the photographs. Now I have to ask you, I mean,
Okay.
you're also someone who, I mean, of course, Sebald comes to my mind immediately. I mean, someone who strongly believes that there is a necessity for photography in both essays and literature. What is your kind of take on that?
The camera sees more than I can see at the time. I remember, there was one moment in Poor People. I was in Kazakhstan and I photographed this old Russian beggar woman whose mouth was open, and she was really, really cold and miserable. I gave her a little money to took her picture, and then I forgot about it, you know, until I printed the negative. And then I looked and I really saw how horrible it was. And I couldn't see that at the time. I had to run around and do my job and make sure that I wasn't getting myself into trouble. But the camera eye can see and remember. And when I stop my lens down, you know, to f/64 or f/90, it can see far away into interiors. And I can come back years later and say, look at that, you know, this is something significant that I didn't see. So to me, the photograph, the archival document, you know, is a treasure that, of course, it's not inexhaustible. It's not like living, moving reality, but it still can retain more than my moment of perception can retain.
So in a way, you're the exact opposite of a photographer. You don't kind of curate reality. You don't kind of, it's not a mise en scène. You don't, because the photographers I've worked with, they kind of spent quite a while observing reality and then deciding how to position it within the aesthetic frame. But in your case, it's kind of like an assistant who is capable of not being distracted by other things that are currently happening.
Yeah, in my photography to illustrate the nonfiction, I try to pose people as little as possible. Sometimes it's necessary. I did a bunch of night work with an 8x10 camera of street prostitutes, and I might say, okay, yeah, just stand right there, but would you mind holding this this lantern or this flashlight so the exposure is not as long? So, you know, that's already an imposition, but I would never say, oh, you know, would you thrust your hip out, you know, would you cock your head? I don't need that crap. If I'm doing some sort of still life, or I've done some transgender self-portraits, and then why not? Here's a model I can exploit, and that person can't complain. So I can be as, you know, as domineering as I want, but I hate to do that with others.
What would you say if someone were to accuse you that, you know, shouldn't, since you're such a great author, shouldn't the text kind of be enough to give a sense of the reality and your kind of perceptions? Why do you need the added help of the photograph?
I like thinking that if some of the things that I say I have seen exceed people's belief, they can look at the photograph and they can believe it. and people are very, very good at not believing things. I think I was telling you last night that I was detained by the FBI for 7 hours on the California-Mexico border, in part because they thought I was the Unabomber. Oh, they didn't know that. And when I told my neighbors, they would say, "No, Bill, you mean you were detained by the Mexicans, right? I mean, the American government does not do that." So, you know, people would say, "No, Bill, no, I don't really believe what you said, you know, about those Thai cleaning ladies. I can't believe their lives are that bad." You look at some of those pictures and you think, it's pretty bleak. It really, really is. And so, and people might see something in the photograph that I didn't see. And it's a way of keeping me honest too. I guess that's what I would say. Yeah. And I don't, for what I do, photographs aren't enough and the text are not enough. I could just have a book of photographs and people would say, "Oh, now this is a very striking photograph, but it would mean more if it had a caption. And the caption would mean more, you know, if it was several pages long, if it was text." So, you know, that's how I see it, yeah.
Well, especially in carbon ideologies, I thought that the pictures also added a kind of poetic level, because they're not direct illustrations. They're often kind of on a tangent. They have a kind of contextual connection, but they lead you to other aspects of how we can look at things. So right. I thought the interaction was very dynamic and multifaceted.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, some of the pictures are, in fact, quite boring as pictures.
If they were just
right
without any context. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there's one picture of a guy in Mexico. He's carrying a cardboard box, and he's under a concrete overpass, and this and this, and the point is that this is this banal, everyday scene that illustrates those big five industrial materials that we can't get away from.
But this is incredible you had mentioned that. On my way to the Alte Schmiede, I saw a guy bringing one of these affluent buildings nearby, bringing, I think, 7 or 8 huge boxes of stuff that someone had ordered. So from Amazon, and from other companies. And I immediately thought of that picture.
Yeah, that's right.
And I thought to myself, only after reading your book did I realize that there's such a perverse and weird sense of using up the planet for something as ridiculous as ordering online.
Right. It's the most disgusting thing. I have a friend who can hardly wait until he can order things by drone. You know, just because it's neat, you know, it's going to be so wonderful. And I'm thinking, you know, why? It's so awful.
So is that being planned, or is that?
Yeah, Amazon's talking about delivering things by drone.
Okay.
Yeah, so
but just, not books by William Vollmann.
Well,
they're too heavy for.
Yeah, they're too heavy, and probably.
But maybe crack or.
Yeah, now you're talking. Yeah, that would be really good. Yeah. And speaking of carbon ideologies, by the way, since my translator, Georg, is here, I just want to tell everyone that he caught a number of errors. He checked almost all my calculations and made the book better, and I'm just inexpressibly grateful to him.
Okay. I take back what I said 2 minutes ago. Don't read the English version. It's full of mistakes.
That's right, yeah.
Read Georg's German version coming out in February.
Right.
You know what? You shouldn't publish something in English before it's been translated into German.
That's right.
This is kind of your safety route.
Right. Well, my Shalomov essay is coming out in German before it comes out in English, so I'm trying to live up to your advice.
Great. When and where is it coming out?
Matthias and Zeitz, I think they're bringing it out in the spring.
Matthias and Zeitz?
Yeah.
Next spring?
Yeah.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, it was a wonderful
Yeah,
honor
they
to get to
did
do
a
that.
complete edition of his works.
Yeah, and they said, "Oh, would you do a little essay?" And then I found out what they wanted was, a couple hundred pages. Okay.
No. Bill, I don't believe you. They probably said 80 pages, and then you send them 800. That
Yeah,
was
maybe
what
that's
happened.
what it was. Yeah, maybe so. Now what about you? Do you, what would you say?
I don't take any pictures.
Okay, but I still like you, yeah.
No one's perfect, as you know.
That's right,
My
yeah.
great weakness is I don't take pictures. The reason I don't take pictures is, and I marvel at how you manage to take some of these pictures, because I find that people change when you take out the camera.
For sure.
There's a kind of awareness that's being introduced, while to me, research also, if it's really successful, has this element of the researcher kind of disappearing or not being as present as he is as someone, in my case, white male coming from an affluent place. Kind of the more you can disappear into just being a fly on the wall, the better.
Right. Well, one thing I found that was really interesting was I did a photo book called Imperial, and the first half of it is 35 millimeter pictures, and the second half is with an 810 camera. And I found that when I was bumbling around the streets of Mexicali with this heavy camera over my shoulder and a dark cloth and all this stuff, people would want to pose, and they would want to look through the ground glass, and I would say, and by the way, you're going to find the image is upside down. And they'd say, and they'd say, wait a second, the image is upside down. And they had a great time, and because it's more of a production, it's a very, very static thing, and people compose themselves in the way that they want to. There was a vendor one time who was making scorpions out of little bits of coat hanger, and he asked if I would take his picture, and he posed for me in the middle of the street holding his scorpions, and it's the way that he wanted us to see him and remember him. Whereas when I was taking a picture of those Cambodian kids under the freeway I was telling you about, playing with their dogs, it was more of a Cartier-Bresson kind of picture where you pull it out and you try to catch the spontaneity. But they're both very, very different. And I have taken what you might call sneak pictures. If there's a, let's say, some homeless drunk passed out, and I don't want to wake him, I don't want to disturb him, and I think, okay, if I can take a picture to show him in the doorway, make people realize the misery of his life, and at the same time being respectful to him, I do it. But by and large, I would rather engage with my subject, and one complaint that the magazines often have, they think that it's very, very unkosher for me to pay my subjects. They think that somehow alters the balance of, and I actually think, no, how could I possibly take a picture of somebody unfortunate and not compensate the person? But all of these things definitely affect the way the person looks and the interaction, and I figure if I'm trying to be honest on the up and up and the person is honest with me, it's going to be a vivid and real picture. There are some times when it isn't. You know, the people who take picture after picture and you see the person's expression starting to get more strained, they're taking a worse and worse series of pictures.
Yeah. But speaking of honesty, I mean, there's a quote here on the cover of the book by The Atlantic, the most honest book about climate change yet. I think that holds true for all your writing. It's kind of writing against hypocrisy. I mean, there's always this element of, let me be brutally honest, first of all with myself, and then with everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, how can I be proud of who I am? I'm another of these captive perpetrators. How much carbon did I burn, you know, flying to Japan to measure the radiation, or tooling around in an air-conditioned car to write about fracking? I have to factor that in. And my carbon footprint is probably worse than that of most people on the planet. And that's just how it is.
But do you think that's one of the reasons there's such a backlash against the whole discourse of climate change and the need for transformation, that especially people who are less affluent feel that it's incredibly hypocritical, because there's always kind of certain activities or certain consumptions are vilified and others are kind of left out, so there's this kind of whole hierarchy of good and bad within the discourse?
Sure, yeah. I think that that people are going to resent the affluent countries more and more, and I imagine whatever kind of future we have is going to be a very angry, bitter, brutal future. People who get dispossessed from their homes all the time, who wonder why we didn't care, why we had to keep fracking and doing all this stuff. But the other thing is that it's a characteristic of you know, well-off liberals to be self-hating. And so that's a way of people forging chains for their minds when they say, oh, I'm not allowed to say this or that anymore. And so if people start saying, oh, yeah, sure, yeah, it's all my fault, oh, I'm so terrible, in a way, that's another way of getting out of it. You can express your guilt.
Isn't that a kind of moral self-cleansing? You know, the moment you engage in self-hatred, you're a better human being, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, if it's for a purpose. If it's not, oh...
It might be subconscious.
Right, yeah. If on the other hand, oh, I'm not allowed to say this particular word anymore because it might offend somebody, that's not a self-cleansing. That's just a self-laceration. Yeah.
But anyway, since you have been so wonderfully optimistic about the future...
Oh, thank you.
Let's end on a negative note.
Okay.
Just tell us, you mentioned you're going to the Ukraine tomorrow. What are you going to do there?
Well, I want to see what it's like for these suffering people, and I wonder if Putin has a grain of truth in what he says, that some people do consider themselves part of Russia, and I'm trying to keep an open mind and put my ignorance first, and I tend to think that it's a very, very hopeless situation, and that it's a proxy war on our part, you know, like Vietnam or Angola, and just to bleed Putin, and at the end, those people are going to be sacrificed. That's my prediction. But I'm hoping I'm wrong, and I'm hoping I see some resilience and see some way that they can live through this. So that's why I want to go.
But you're going to write the text, I'm assuming.
Of course.
For?
It's for Granta.
For the magazine.
So, yeah, I'll just go there and see what I can learn. So.
Okay, come back.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Anytime you come back, I'm going to give you some Bulgarian schnapps.
Well,
just to motivate you to come back.
I'll definitely come back and drink your schnapps and buy you something too. Thanks for all your kindness, and all of you. Thanks for coming to this, and I'm very grateful to everybody.
Yeah, and please read Bill's books. They're absolutely incredible.
You're very kind. Yeah. A very nice audience, huh? Yeah, a very kind audience too. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah.